Race Against Time, Japan's final push in 1945. Race Against Time, the final months. By early 1945, Japan's situation had become desperate. American B-29s were reducing Japanese cities to ash. The naval blockade had choked off critical resources. Yet, in this darkest hour, the pace of weapons development actually accelerated, driven by a mix of patriotic fervor, technological ingenuity, and sheer desperation. In March 1945, Japanese naval engineers completed designs for the underwater torpedo boat, a vessel that combined the stealth of a submarine with the speed of a torpedo boat. It could travel underwater at 40 knots using a revolutionary closed-cycle engine, emerge suddenly to launch attacks, then disappear before enemies could respond. Construction began on the first prototypes, with plans to deploy them against the anticipated American invasion fleet. Professor Takeo Yasuda, one of the engineers on the project, recalled, "We worked 20-hour days. Food was scarce, air raids constant. But we believed if we could just complete these weapons in time, Japan might yet avoid defeat. There was a sense that we were the last line of defense for our homeland." Meanwhile, in a secluded facility in northern Honshu, Japan's atomic research program, codenamed NEGO, was making its own desperate push. While far behind the Manhattan Project in resources and progress, Japanese physicists had correctly worked out the theoretical basis for a uranium-based bomb. They had even begun preliminary separation of uranium isotopes using thermal diffusion. Dr. Yoshio Nishina, Japan's leading nuclear physicist, wrote in his final report, "With adequate resources and time, we could produce a weapon of unprecedented power. However, neither resource is available to us now. What we lack is not knowledge, but time." As Allied forces captured Okinawa and prepared for the invasion of the Japanese home islands, these secret weapons projects took on an apocalyptic importance. They represented Japan's last hope of avoiding unconditional surrender, a technological miracle that might yet change the course of the war. The planned Allied invasion of Japan, Operation Downfall, would have been the largest amphibious operation in military history, dwarfing even the D-Day landings. Japanese military planners knew this was coming and concentrated their remaining resources on preparing a defense in which these secret weapons would play a crucial role. The Ketsu-Go defense plan called for deploying the newly developed weapons in a coordinated campaign against the invasion fleet. I-400 submarines would launch surprise attacks on troop transports. Kamikaze units equipped with Oka rockets and jet aircraft would swarm the fleet. Titan-manned torpedoes would prey on ships that made it through the outer defenses. On land, Japanese forces had stockpiled chemical and biological weapons developed by the infamous Unit 731. They had prepared special ceramic bombs designed to disperse these agents across invasion beaches. The remaining fuel reserves were set aside specifically for the new jet fighters that would challenge Allied air superiority. General Korechika Anami, Japan's Minister of War, told the Supreme Council in July 1945, "The decisive battle is upon us. Every scientific achievement, every technological secret has been poured into weapons to defend our sacred soil. America may have superior numbers, but we have the advantage of fighting for our homeland with weapons they cannot imagine." What these preparations meant was that, had the invasion gone forward, American forces would have faced weapons systems they had never encountered before, from jets and rocket planes to advanced submarines and guided missiles. Military historians estimate that Operation Downfall could have resulted in up to 1 million American casualties and far more Japanese deaths. But these weapons never got their chance to fight. On August 6th and 9th, 1945, atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, America's own superweapon that rendered Japan's innovations moot. Within days, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender, and the secret weapons projects came to an abrupt halt. As American occupation forces entered Japan in September 1945, intelligence officers raced to secure the remnants of these secret weapons programs. Operation Paperclip, better known for capturing German scientists, also targeted Japanese technical experts and their research. The Americans were stunned by what they found. Naval intelligence officers examining the I-400 submarines reported them as being at least 20 years ahead of our current technology. Air Force analysts studying the Nakajima Kika jet aircraft found design elements they immediately incorporated into their own jet development programs. Perhaps most valuable were the advances in materials science, rocketry, and electronics that Japanese researchers had achieved under the extreme pressure of wartime scarcity. These innovations, born of necessity when cut off from traditional resources, offered approaches that American engineers hadn't considered. Dr. James Williams, a U.S. Naval Research Laboratory scientist assigned to study captured Japanese technology, wrote in his 1946 assessment, "The Japanese approach to problem-solving differs fundamentally from our own. Facing resource limitations we never encountered, they developed solutions of remarkable elegance and efficiency. There are lessons here that will benefit American technology for decades to come." He wasn't wrong. Japanese advances in miniaturization, fuel efficiency, and materials science, all developed as wartime necessities, would influence post-war technology in everything from transistor radios to spacecraft components. The ceramics developed for aircraft engines eventually found their way into heat shields for the Apollo program. Many of the Japanese engineers who had worked on these secret projects went on to become founding figures in Japan's post-war industrial renaissance. Yutaka Tanaka, who had designed control systems for the Oka, later helped establish Sony's precision manufacturing division. Masaru Ibuka, who worked on radar systems during the war, co-founded Sony Corporation in 1946. What if these weapons had been completed sooner? What if the war had continued for another 6 months? These questions have fascinated military historians for decades. Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, later acknowledged, "Had the Japanese deployed these weapons in 1944 rather than 1945, our advance across the Pacific would have been significantly more costly, perhaps even delayed by years." Military historian Robert Armstrong offers this assessment. Japan's superweapons represented a technological leap that could have changed the strategic balance if deployed at scale. The I-400 submarines could have struck the Panama Canal, disrupting the entire American logistical system. Jet fighters could have challenged B-29 bombing campaigns. Long-range rockets could have forced the dispersal of Allied forces. But technology alone rarely determines the outcome of wars. Even had these weapons been fully deployed, Japan faced overwhelming American industrial capacity. For every advanced weapon Japan could produce, America could build hundreds of conventional weapons. The resource disparity was simply too great to overcome, even with technological superiority in select areas. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this story is how Japan's wartime technical expertise was redirected after 1945. Many of the engineers who had once designed weapons of war became pioneers in Japan's economic miracle, creating world-leading consumer electronics, automobiles, and industrial machinery. Dr. Shiro Takahashi, who had worked on jet engine development, reflected years later. The skills we developed under the most terrible conditions of war became the foundation for rebuilding our nation in peace. The precision, the attention to detail, the drive for efficiency. These became Japan's competitive advantage in the global marketplace. This transformation wasn't accidental. The inability to rely on abundant resources during the war had forced Japanese engineers to prioritize efficiency, miniaturization, and careful use of materials, exactly the skills needed to succeed in post-war consumer markets. Mitsubishi, which had produced the deadly Zero fighter, redirected its aircraft expertise to build Japan's first commercial passenger plane in 1962. Sony adapted military miniaturization techniques to create the transistor radio. Toyota applied lessons from wartime production efficiency to revolutionize global manufacturing with its Toyota production system. The same innovative spirit that had produced submarines carrying aircraft and balloon bombs traversing the Pacific found new expression in bullet trains, robotics, and electronics that would transform daily life around the world. Japan's economic miracle had its surprising roots in the desperate innovations of a war they ultimately lost. The story of Japan's WWII Superweapons offers fascinating insights into the nature of innovation itself. These revolutionary designs weren't created in ideal conditions with abundant resources. They emerged from scarcity, desperation, and necessity. Cut off from normal supply chains, facing overwhelming odds, Japanese engineers were forced to think differently. They couldn't simply build more conventional weapons. They had to build smarter weapons. This constraint-driven innovation produced solutions that might never have emerged otherwise. As we face our own global challenges today, from climate change to resource depletion, there are lessons to be learned from this historical episode. Constraints don't merely limit creativity. Properly harnessed, they can drive breakthroughs by forcing us to question fundamental assumptions. The I-400 submarine existed because someone asked, what if a submarine could carry aircraft? The Fugo balloon bombs existed because someone asked, how can we reach America without ships or planes? These what-if questions, born of desperation, led to technological leaps. This isn't to romanticize war or minimize its horrors. The secret weapons of Imperial Japan were designed to kill, and many of the programs, particularly biological weapons research, involved terrible human atrocities. But understanding how innovation happens, even in dark contexts, can help us direct that same creative energy toward solving humanity's shared problems. Today, few physical remnants of these ambitious projects survive. Only one I-400 submarine still exists, resting on the ocean floor near Hawaii, where it was scuttled by American forces after study. The advanced aircraft were mostly destroyed, the underground factories sealed or repurposed. But the legacy of these technologies surrounds us in ways we rarely recognize. The composite materials in our smartphones, the fuel cells powering zero-emission vehicles, the just-in-time manufacturing that brings us everything from cars to computers, all have their partial origins in innovations born during Japan's darkest hours. History is never simple. The same engineering brilliance that produced these fearsome weapons also lifted post-war Japan from devastation to prosperity. The same human ingenuity that creates tools for destruction can create tools for flourishing. The choice of how to direct our technical capabilities remains, as always, the essential human question. As we look back at these forgotten superweapons, we glimpse not just an alternate history of what might have been, but a reminder of human creativity's double-edged nature, and perhaps a cautionary tale about the directions we choose for our own technological futures. Thank you for watching our documentary on Japan's forgotten WWII Superweapons. If you enjoyed this exploration of hidden history, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below and check out our other videos on fascinating aspects of Japanese history and culture. Until next time.